Today, I'm going to talk about the relationship of pragmatism to truth. Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. The thing that put me in mind of this question was actually an exchange I saw recently. I was watching a video in which Chris Williamson, who has the Modern Wisdom podcast, was talking with Jordan Peterson. And Chris said something about how it seems like to be happy, or even to be functional, that you need a certain amount of delusion. And I maybe I'll get to what exactly he meant. And Jordan Peterson it is relevant. The what he meant was essentially, roughly speaking, like you need some level of believing that things will work out in order to try to actually pursue goals. Because if you don't believe that, then it will paralyze you and you won't actually try to do anything in practice. And Jordan's response was something, he was distinguishing between essentially delusion and hope. And it was entirely reasonable. But the funny thing is, I could see a very characteristically Jordan Peterson answer if he were to have responded, well, and I can't do a Jordan Peterson voice. I can't even really get his cadence. His voice is so, it's interesting, very unique, very hard to imitate. Anyway, but his response he could have made that I can hear his voice saying it. It's so characteristically Peterson, would be something along the lines of, well, if you have to believe in it, then maybe it isn't false. And that kind of got me thinking about the whole issue of pragmatism, which is, roughly speaking, believing things because they are practical or pragmatic, rather than, precisely because you have, believe them to actually be true. Now, there are different ways of taking this. One sort of pragmatism, the kind of pragmatism that is, roughly speaking, like just believe something because you find it useful, not because you think it's actually true. Well, that's just dishonest. I mean, that's just saying that the truth doesn't actually matter and wanting literally to live in delusion that you don't care what true is, you just want some sort of result. And that's obviously bad. I don't think there's much of anything to say about that. You meet plenty of people like this, of course. But there are a lot of people who aren't very truthful. So, yeah, so that one's obviously bad. I don't think there's any point in belaboring it, but I just want to be very clear that is not in any sense what I'm talking about, because that's really bad. And also, I should mention, I'm not generally speaking much of a pragmatist. I don't really go in for that. I go much more in for philosophy. So this is not me defending something that I actually do, but it's an interesting idea. And the sort of thing that I could imagine Peterson having said, and again, to be clear, that's not a quote from him, that's something that seems so typically Peterson that I can almost hear it in his voice, but he did not literally say, at least not here. He said somewhat similar things in other contexts. Not super similar, somewhat similar. Just need to be, really clear on that. Anyway, the point being, though, that there is a kind of pragmatism which is more properly speaking a kind of humility. And that is, and this is something that, again, is that aspect of humility is something that Peterson does certainly talk about. And, you see far more broadly, too, which is roughly speaking that, like, there are a lot of things that we don't know. And there are things that we are fairly confident about. But the problem is the things that we're pretty confident about, if they lead to absurd conclusions, then we probably don't know everything about them. So, where this really, really comes up is in the sort of reductive materialism that you can sort of abstract from physics, or science more generally, the sciences. Although it's really quite a mistake to do so, to say that the sciences are methodologically natural is simply to describe what they are, in the same sense that butterfly collecting is methodologically butterfly-centric. Within butterfly collecting, the only animals that exist are butterflies, methodologically speaking, because all you're trying to collect are butterflies. You don't collect anything other than butterflies within butterfly collecting, but that doesn't mean that, like, your butterfly collecting is about collecting them, so it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have any implications to say that, like, within butterfly collecting, you neglect all other insects. Well, yeah, the same is true if you're collecting beetles, you collect butterflies. And if you collect toy cars, you're methodologically toy car centric. If you are studying something, methodologically speaking, the thing you're studying is that thing. And so it doesn't, that whole like science is methodologically naturalistic it's barely even tautological. It's more just definitional. That to say it's, the study of nature is naturalistic. Yeah, no kidding. It's like literally within it. So the point of that is that people will abstract from the fact that science is the study of nature. Its original name was natural philosophy. It's the philosophy of nature. To some sort of idea that, like, well, science is describing the entire world and it only assumes natural explanations, so somehow this implies that natural explanations are all that exist, which is a massive misunderstanding of what's going on. The idea that nature, I mean, it's not even definite. It's not even really possible to define. The idea that this must mean that nature cannot have been created by anyone, given its nature, even though it's a composite entity that obviously can't have created itself. Anyway, or, cannot necessarily exist. I'm sorry, just the nonsense of it is occasionally a little bit overwhelming. Because the thing is, I've done this so often, I can sort of, not like literally hear people's objections, but I've seen so often, I can just so vividly anticipate the various objections and how useless they are, so it occasionally gets a little distracting. So I apologize for that. But doing my best to not let those things distract me, the point there is that kind of naturalism sort of does seep in, and you get this idea of like, well, science is really, really great, especially if you don't actually learn all of the times science has been wrong and all the things that it doesn't know. If you don't do any of that, then you can sort of get this idea that science knows everything. And then, from there, it's like, well, science is natural. So like the only thing we actually know is like the natural stuff, specifically the things that like the really hard sciences focus on. So like physics and chemistry, and biology. And like, that's the some domain of the things that we know about. And so again, you can't justify any of that, but I'm describing sort of a mental drift that you see a fair amount of. And then from there it kind of drifts into this kind of idea like, well, there are all these things like the, that you don't really find within that. So like, we know that, we have instincts, but we don't know that the world is in any way ordered. So like the one is knowledge and the other isn't. And therefore, like we know that, it's not like they're going to finish the sentence. But the point there is that, like, you see that, I mean, you can see that sort of in Peterson's, the thing he fights against in the origin, a lot of the pain in his voice. But you can see it in Chris Williamson too. He's got that same basic kind of, I'm not saying that this is philosophy, but it looks very, very much like he has that sort of basic worldview that's at least very heavily influenced him. And within that, you'll see this idea of like the various things that you need to believe in order to actually do anything are not supported by the things that they hold to be knowledge, that they're entirely outside of it, and moreover are often somewhat contradictory to it. So like the idea, roughly speaking, that there are just some blind laws that everything follows, that everything is the epiphenomena, epi meaning above and phenomena meaning the thing that happens. So the epiphenomena is like the tip of the iceberg above the water. It's the things that you see that are caused by things that you don't see, roughly, is what epiphenomena means. And so that the world we live in is this epiphenomena of these rules that exist underneath it, and these rules are entirely indifferent to the composite entities that they happen to accidentally generate. You see that, in physics, you see that in chemistry and so on, that like, that the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, don't, care about things like love and loyalty and so on. That they have no notion of things like justice or like, rewarding hard work. And so none of those things are real. And, in consequence, they're just these epiphenomena. And so there's absolutely nothing within the universe that makes it in any way likely that doing something worthwhile is going to actually accomplish anything at all. And so like that attitude, and it's like a disposition of mind. I don't mean it's like a conscious attitude in the sense of like the stance the person chooses to take, but it's sort of like this nagging doubt in the back of their mind. Roughly speaking, that life is a cruel joke with no punchline that nobody's told, and that on some level that's the only that's reality. And if life is a cruel joke with no punchline that no one's told, it's really stupid to bother trying to eat well and live well, to be loyal to friends and so on. Like, it's all going to fail. There's no reason whatever to believe anything good will come from any of this. And the thing is, like, that's kind of like within that worldview / attitude, that's kind of true as far as it goes. Like, there really is no reason to believe that anything will work out whatsoever. Like, you don't have any reason to believe the future is going to be anything like the past. It often isn't, for one thing. This is one reason, incidentally, like you'll see a lot of, your more full-bore atheists tend to be people who are really, really good at not thinking about things. Often, this is one reason why, like a lot of them you kind of think are like on the neurodivergent spectrum, because there's like that allows them to like simply not notice large amounts of life, and this makes all sorts of it makes it easier for them to think that life is really simple and easy to understand. But at the same time, like if you spend time with them, you'll also notice that they just they really hate it when you remind them of all of the things that contradict the basic simple rules that they tend to live their life by. You bring up like all the many, many times that whatever, general patterns they live their life by have been violated in history and for massive numbers of people, and they're just like, shut up. So like, that's why like that sort of personality tends to go better with like being a lot more into like, yes, nothing means anything and the world is just a joke with no punchline that no one's told. Isn't it great? Yeah. So when you get to people who aren't like that, who have, who have better functioning memories, frankly, who pick up on more of the world, etc., like they can't face that very much because, of course, it's intrinsically paralyzing. They're not foolish enough to keep on going in the face of it. And so you get to Chris Williamson's question about that, about, it seems like you have to have some level of delusion in order to be functional. And the thing there is, and the thing about the pragmatism is that in that context, pragmatism becomes essentially humility. That is to say, like, yeah, okay, within like some of the things we think we know, we don't see any space for the stuff that is, that is required to believe in order to actually function. That, and this is where Peterson said there's a difference between delusion and taking on faith. And in a sense he's right, in a sense he's wrong. He's right in like a more, like more true to life sense. There's a massive difference between delusion and, between delusion and hope. Because hope is not holding something to be the case that you know to be false, unlike delusion. That hope is believing in the possibility of things that you know to be possible. And like technically speaking, he's correct, but in the context of the question that Chris asked, he kind of isn't. That because in the context of the question Chris asked, what he was asking essentially is that, like, that you don't have any realistic chance of accomplishing anything. That there is no way, the world is too complex. You cannot actually, in any sense, like realize the the object of your will, that you're too small, your intellect is too small for that to actually be accomplishable. And if you're at all realistic, you'll realize that like none of your plans ever work out the way you intended. Like they'll work out somewhat, and like on the really, 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 really small scale, like, yeah, when you intend to drink water, you can accomplish that. And there's certain things of a little bit greater complexity that you can accomplish, but not very much. And even there, it often doesn't turn out exactly the way you intended. Works out a lot better too if you pretend that a general trend is actually like specific. So like, I want to lose weight. So you use dieting. No, does it actually go the way you intended? No. I mean, like the general trend, like a general direction, yeah, you can kind of head in that general direction. You can do things that eventually get you in that direction. But if you were to like actually plan out on a day-by-day basis, like here are the various things that I'm going to eat and here's the amount of weight I'm going to lose on a day-by-day basis, you'd be wrong in almost all those cases. It's only by taking a general trend and pretending that's a location that you can, in the technical sense here I'm talking about, pretend that like yeah, I can definitely achieve my goals. Yeah, I mean, in the broad sense, yes, but like what you're actually doing is essentially living in hope, because there's like a direction, and then you have faith that heading in that direction will get you to there. It's very possible to not accomplish those things. But anyway, so the point of it is, in that context that sort of was brought up, hope is a delusion because you don't know enough to actually accomplish your goals. Not any of your, big goals, and not in any sort of specific way. This is, by the way, I've done a video on like why consequentialism doesn't work, and it's the same reason why. Like, you simply don't know what the consequences of your actions are. The world is too complex, so it won't work. And so the reason why life actually does work, of course, is because God is in charge of the world, and God actually orders the world in such a way that by following, Aristotle, my reticulated python is slithering over here, and he partially knocked something over, which distracted me. Sorry about that. The point being is that, God orders the world in such a way that by following rules, by following, patterns, we're able to accomplish the things that we are intending because we understand the relationship of these patterns to goals. And so we can live in that hope because the world has actually been ordered according to it. So like, that's the real reason why it works. What Jordan's essentially is sort of like saying that you don't really need to worry about the actual mechanism of how this is supposed to work out, just to bear in mind that it's possible, and it's not, strictly speaking, a delusion to live within that. And although he doesn't push that too far, because again, like the book that he's working on, We Who Wrestle with God, Chris asked him, like, what's your goal for this book? And his answer was that, essentially to make the atheist position untenable in the modern world. And so, Jordan only pushes that idea of hope without mechanisms so far. But the point here is, in this context, I think I've illustrated how pragmatism then becomes, can be a humility about this. It can be a saying like, yeah, like this doesn't make any sense within the worldview that you've described, but how sure are you really that worldview that you've described is fully real? How sure are you that you are fundamentally mistaken when you want to accomplish something, anything, despite the fact that you don't actually, you can't see a direct path to it? How sure are you that you're not leaving something out of the world, and that part of you that needs to believe it's possible to succeed in order to do things, psychologically speaking, isn't right? And pragmatism in that sense does have a real relationship to truth, because of course you do need to be humble in order to embrace the truth. And at the same time, it's also, pragmatism in that sense can be simple epistemic humility. It can be a matter of saying like, okay, as much as this looks wrong, as much as this looks like I would have to believe in delusions in order to bother getting out of bed in the morning, in order to bother going to the gym, in order to bother eating healthy food instead of just pigging out on candy and shooting up on heroin. It's kind of tied to what Chesterton said. When he talked about that, like, there are stages in doubt, that there's a sort of cheap skepticism, which is just, doubting other people. But there is a later stage to skepticism where you learn to doubt even yourself, where you learn to doubt even your doubt. And that's really the proper skepticism, that like once you've doubted, it's not good enough to doubt some things. Like, it's a good start, but you need to doubt literally everything, including doubt. And when you get to the point where you have doubted absolutely everything, now you are ready to really begin pursuing truth. And so that kind of pragmatism is essentially tied into that doubt of doubt. That like, yeah, you don't believe in this. And yeah, this is kind of impossible. And yeah, this makes no sense. But have enough humility to admit that maybe the thing you do feel most certain about is actually the part that's wrong. Maybe you're misinterpreting which parts of this thing that you feel certain about is actually the true part. Because that's the thing, like, this is not saying like, oh, maybe you are completely wrong. Maybe there really isn't a nature at all. That's not what that epistemic humility is really about. It's about like, well, the thing that you think you're certain about is actually, itself kind of complex. There are different parts to it. And I mean, in the specifics, this better if you studied science more deeply, like actually pick up physics books and look through the equations and read through what are the, what are the actual experiments, what were the actual experimental results, not like, like somebody like measured gravity, but like, what are the, I can't remember the name of the experiment now. The one where the guy measured the gravitational constant, equivalently to, he was actually measuring the specific gravity of the Earth, but where he used a massive weight and a smaller weight, and he had the thing on a torsional balance, and then you could move the smaller weight in and out, and when you move the smaller weight in, there is a very slight movement of the massive weight to the smaller weight. Or maybe it's the smaller weight's the massive weight. I can't remember which side they were on. Anyway, torsional balance, by the way, is a thing essentially like if you spin something by a horsehair, it turning does actually have resistance because it shortens ever so trivially, but this imposes incredibly light resistance to turning, which is very necessary because the gravitational pull between like a 200-pound mass and a 10-pound mass is, well, it's about enough to like twist a horsehair inside of a shed so no wind can affect it, which is what that experiment actually was. So like, look up the particular experiment and look up like how much did it move, so you actually know what's really going on. Keep it not at the level of we've discovered exoplanets, but like, well, the periodic dimming by a certain amount, the regular periodic dimming in a star, etc., is an indication that there's an exoplanet of a certain size at a certain distance, etc. Because you can work out the distance from the period and so on. Because you have different periods at different distances from the thing you're orbiting. Anyway, so like go look into these things and you'll realize how complex these things actually are. You don't have to do that; it just helps to doing this. And so if you do that, if you go through and look at like, okay, my this thing that I'm really confident about is actually kind of complex. There are different parts to it, and which of these are the parts that I'm genuinely confident in, and which are the parts that are ancillary that I'd kind of been grouping together but actually aren't nearly as certain, and the implications of these things. Which one of these things actually has the implications that bother me? Is it the stuff I'm really sure about, or is it the ancillary stuff I'm not nearly so sure about? Now, pragmatism is kind of just lumping this all together into, well, bear in mind you could be wrong about that stuff. So, it's again, like, that's part of why I'm not real interested in pragmatism. Like, I'd much rather actually read books on physics and get a sense of like what is real physics versus what is stuff people just say about physics and try to claim the authority of the actual physical experiments for the stuff that they're saying that isn't actually contained in those physical experiments. I like that approach a lot better myself. But you can, if you don't have the time and the inclination to really delve into all of these many, many things that do take quite a long time to study, and it's mostly you have to be kind of nerdy to actually find them interesting on their own. You can just sort of subsume all of it under the heading of, well, it is possible that I'm wrong. And if the things that I'm confident about conflict with other things that I'm equally confident about, well, maybe I should consider a little bit more that, if I should be as confident in these things, or maybe I should hold that, like, I don't even have a complete model. I don't know all the pieces. And there is the incredibly big problem. If you don't know all of the pieces, you don't know the proper relationships or proper proportion of the importance of these things. Like, the thing that looks really important may be barely of any importance compared to the part that you don't know. Because since you don't know how these things relate to each other. And this is true, like, if you're looking at a piece of code, if you're looking at a machine, if you're looking at a biological system, if you only know how part of it works, and they definitely interact with the other parts, you may know 99% of it, you may know 1% of it. And you have no way of knowing until you actually know all of the stuff. So there are ways you can kind of bound how much you don't know within extremely simple things. So, like if you don't know what the things on the back of a hammer are for, you still have a pretty good sense of how the hammer works for, pounding a nail in, because it's such an incredibly simple thing. So, like, it's not to say that it's impossible to bound it, but to bound your ignorance, but that only works in practice in incredibly simple things. Outside of incredibly simple things where stuff doesn't really interact with each other, it just doesn't work. You don't have a good sense. And so pragmatism can be that. It can be having the humility to not be so confident that you know all the things that you think you do, and in particular, their relationship to everything else, and very especially their relationship to the stuff that you don't know. And so that is, I think, like, this is not a stopping point. This kind of pragmatism, it's defensible, unlike the kind of pragmatism that's like, screw truth, just, do whatever you need. But while it is defensible and a good start, it is not a good ending point. This is not a goal. It's not a place you should be. It's not a place you should aim to stay. So it can be it can be a way to, dig yourself out of the hole that you're in. Metaphorically, the epistemic hole, like you're mired in the mud, and like to get out and start getting higher towards, a more full truth. But it's a method for getting yourself unstuck on the path towards truth. It is not a method for actually getting to the truth. But it can be very important to get yourself unstuck. Like, if you're stuck, you're not going to get to, there. You're not going to get to truth if you're stuck at some point. And so if there's a method that can get you unstuck, then that at least is a good starting point. But, it is, of course, possible for people to become wedded to that, where this thing that, got them unstuck, and they don't want to give it up now. They want to use this the entire way. And that pragmatism is a mistake as a means of, like, reaching the fullness of truth. So, my defense of it is definitely pretty limited, but within that context, like within that context of people being stuck and seeing no way out, and pragmatism is a hell of a lot better than concluding that you just have to have delusions. You just need to believe in stuff that's false. That's worse. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at. If you like this video, then clicking the like button, according to YouTube, will make them more likely to recommend it to others. If you know anyone who might get something out of this video, then it would be kind to share it with them, or just share it on social media in general. And if you'd like to see future videos of mine, you can subscribe. And if you're not in the habit of checking your subscriptions page regularly, then I suggest clicking the notification bell and setting that to always, because otherwise subscribing to a channel basically just sort of like gives YouTube a hint that maybe it should consider recommending these videos to you, possibly at some point, if they think so. It's a funny world we live in. God bless.